Hi everybody. I'm out in the garden today. I tried to get Millie to come with me, but she just gave me a big yawn and rolled over. So we're gonna let her sleep for a little while. I have this wonderful book today called Winnie Finn, Worm Farmer. And it's written by Carol Brenler. And the pictures are by Ard Hoyt. And just like we did yesterday in making our worm bin, let's take a look and see what Winnie Finn does. And this book is very special to me. It was given to me by Miss Linda many years ago when we started our tree garden and our compost bin. So we've got Winnie Finn, Worm Farmer. Winnie Finn was earthworm crazy. She turned over stones all around Quincy County in hopes of meeting squirmy worms. After a rain, Winnie found worms on sidewalks and coaxed them back into their holes. On cloudy days, she took them for walks in her rickety wagon. And sometimes she even raced them. Winnie Finn knew that the biggest earthworm ever was 10 feet long. She knew that an earthworm has 5 hearts, and she knew which end was its head and which was its tail, because the head always goes first when it moves. When spring came to Quincy County, Winnie started thinking about the Quincy County Fair. The fair had prizes for things like best-looking puppies, best egg-laying hens, and the best growing corn stalks. Winnie Finn wanted to win a prize too. With the prize money, she could buy herself a brand new wagon. Did they have a prize at the Quincy County Fair for the best worms? Worms, said Mr. Abernathy. Nonsense. There's no prize for worms. This year, I'm raising corn. With the right fertilizer, my stalks will shoot up high enough to pluck their own raindrops from the clouds. If I only knew what the right fertilizer was, I'd share my prize with anyone who could bring me some. Worms, said Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan, don't be silly. There's no prize for worms. I'm raising Plymouth Rock hens this time. With the right feed, they'll lay so many eggs, we'll be eating omelets the size of rubber rafts for breakfast. If only I knew what the right feed was. I'd share my prize with anyone who could find some for me. Worms, said Mr. Peasley. Are you sure, Winnie? I don't think there's a price for worms. This summer, I'm raising Afghan pups. If I can make their coats as smooth and as sleek and as slipper satin, they are sure to win a prize. If only I knew how to give them shiny coats. I'd share my prize with anyone who could tell me that. Oh, well, Winnie Finn knew how to find the right corn fertilizer and the right chicken feed, and she knew how to give puppies shiny coats. And it all started with worms. So, she borrowed a seed crate from Mr. Abernathy, who reminded her, you know, you can't pin a blue ribbon on a worm. And when she asked Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan for some chicken manure, she said, there's no worm trophy, young lady. And when she asked to borrow Mr. Peasley's wash tub that he used for bathing his puppies, he said, there's no best in show for worms, Winnie Finn. But Winnie didn't pay them any mind. Soon she'd be sharing their prizes. Soon she would have a brand new wagon. First, I will make a worm farm, said Winnie Finn, and she filled Mr. Abernathy's crate with soil, some strips of newspaper, and leaves. That would be the worm's house, right? That's what we did yesterday with Millie. She mixed in Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan's chicken manure. That would be the worm's food. Then she filled Mr. Peasley's wash tub with water and poured it over everything. This will keep the worms moist and help them breathe, said Winnie Finn. Winnie found all the red wigglers she could find. She spread them over their new home and watched them slither into the soil. For weeks, Winnie watered her worm farm. She fed the worms eggshells and carrot peelings and coffee grounds. She took them for walks and she sang to them. She even tried to give them all names, but it was hard to tell them apart, even for Winnie Finn. Finally, the worm farm was ready. Winnie found Mr. Abernathy watering his corn crop. I have a present for you, Mr. Abernathy, she said. Spread this around your corn. You'll have corn stalks tall enough to pluck their own raindrops from the clouds. Sure enough, a few weeks later, the corn was taller than Winnie. Oh, Winnie Finn, you were right. Worm fertilizer was just what this corn needed. How can I ever thank you? Some corn would be nice, Mr. Abernathy. Winnie took the corn to Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan. I have something for you, she said. Feed this fresh corn to your hens. You'll have plenty of eggs for omelets the size of rubber rafts for breakfast. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan's hens were laying so many eggs that she had to scramble to keep up. My goodness, Winnie Finn, fresh corn was just what my darlings needed. However, can I thank you? With some eggs, please, Mrs. Y.O. Winnie Finn gave the eggs to Mr. Peasley. Mix these in with your puppy's food, she told him, and they will have coats as smooth and as sleek as slipper satin. Thank you, Winnie. You are so clever. I will go mix some up this minute. Right, he's going to give them to his puppies. On the day of the Quincy County Fair, everybody came to see who would take first prizes. Winnie kept her fingers crossed for the judging of the tallest cornstalk, the best egg layer, and the prettiest puppy. There's the judge, right? And Mr. Abernathy's cornstalks, Mrs. Yamasaki O'Sheridan's Plymouth Rock hens, and Mr. Peasley's Afghan pups all took first prizes. Right? And just like they promised, they shared their money and their winnings with Winnie. It was all thanks to Winnie Finn and her worm farm. With her share of the prize money, Winnie picked out the best new red wagon in Quincy County. And on her way home, she couldn't help but notice Mrs. Alluvial's drooping dahlias, Mr. Yorkington Smith's second-rate Rhode Island Reds, and Mrs. McCartney's lackluster Lhasa Apsos. Winnie would have to find more worms. And she did. Now, on the back page, it talks a little bit about red wigglers. And it takes a red wiggler about 2 months to turn its food into good soil. So I'm going to show you my compost bin. That was Winnie Finn Worm Farmer. Take a little walk through the garden. We haven't been out here in what, about a week or two? So you can see there's some changes. It's been a little chilly and quite windy, so not everything is where it's supposed to be. But we've got some flowers coming up. And I keep my, oh look, we've got a little pear that's starting to grow. There's a few more. All of those are going to be pears when they grow up. Oh, my first rose. That's exciting. So over here, this is going to be my vegetable garden. I do all of my veggies in pots. First of all, because there's no room for them to fit and all of that. But also in case I ever needed to bring some things to Amtree. That way I could always just pick them up. Now this is my raspberry bush. And you can see that's where the raspberries are going to start to form. This guy needs a bigger pot. But this is what I came to show you today. This is my composter. Might look familiar. We have one of these at the school. This is called the Earth Machine, but you can make your own. We made a vermicomposter which has worms in it. That's on my porch. We'll visit the worms tomorrow. And what you do with this is you open it, and in the top goes all your waste, all of the stuff for the worms to eat. I've got some cranberries, they take forever, some brown bags. Underneath there's vegetable clippings. And all in this part, this middle part, is where it starts to break down. See, it starts to get all rotten and stuff. And then down at the bottom is where all the worms live, and they start to eat it, and it turns into soil. And then when I go to garden, I lift this up, and whoops, and all this good soil comes down. This didn't start out as dirt. This started out as food. The banana peels and apple cores and some leaves and some newspaper and brown bags, and my worms that live inside the composter ate it all up and turned it to soil for me. So this takes a long time. The stuff at the bottom we probably put in, well, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. But with our red wigglers, who are big eaters, it will happen even more quickly. So that's it. We'll take a walk around the garden as more stuff starts to bloom. Hopefully the weather's been crazy. But what I would encourage you to do is, even if Mom and Dad don't want you to make a worm bin, you can at least go out and explore in your yard and garden some signs of worms. Usually here's where I find, of course we had rain, so it doesn't really work, but usually around the edges of my rocks you can see all these little round castings. That's how you know we've got worms. This is the side of my house, and this is, see the worm bin? That's where it's going to stay for a while. This way I can just throw my food scraps in it without having to come outside all the way through the garden. All right, friends. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.